So welcome back. Today is all going to be about squares and angles because we are talking about Eduardo Benito and the Art Deco movement. If you're watching this video and you're like one of the only 30 people who watch my previous video about Eduardo Benito, I'm actually deleting the previous one and redoing the video because I have found so many new things to add to the script, and also as I'm planning a series of videos about artists who worked for perfume ads, and I'm already working on the next one, which is Charnoté, and I'm gonna make wings and a lot of stuff. Eduardo Benito was a Spanish fashion illustrator. He was born in 1891 and he died in 1981. He studied at the Beaux-Arts of Valladolid and of San Fernando in Madrid. So he arrived in Paris in 1912 and he famously worked for Paul Poiret to create fabric. So indeed in 1911 the fashion designer had created L'École des Arts Décoratifs Marne, named after one of his daughters. So the line of objects created in this school saw the collaboration of Paul Poiret and famously Raoul Dufy, and so they created a lot of fabrics. But Eduardo Benito also famously created fashion illustrations for magazines like Femina, La Gazette du Breton, and most importantly maybe Vogue. So the French edition, the British edition, the American edition, all of them. From 1914 to 1918 there was World War I, and so every effort mattered to help with the war. So in 1915, Eduardo Benito participated in a book called La Grande Guerre vue par les artistes, published by Berger-Levrault and Georges Cré and Company. In his introduction to the book, Gustave Geoffroy said about Eduardo Benito, quoting, Benito, très succinct, coloriste à la manière d'Épinal, dont le retour restera sans doute et avec raison populaire. And still between 1914 and 1918, he also illustrated some issues of a magazine called La Grande Guerre. Joseph de Semar also compliments one of his work in one of the issues. Still participating in the war effort in its own way, in 1918, he illustrated a book about the bombing of Reims Cathedral. In the same year, he did a collaboration with Jean Cocteau for a book called Dans le ciel de la patrie. Still in 1918, he created some illustration for the Grasset bookshop, which were then printed at a limited number, celebrating the independence of the United States, but also the alliance between the United States and France. At that point, the style that made him famous is still not fully developed, but we can see the beginnings of it, whether it's in the way he uses the lines or the shapes of the faces. And indeed, all throughout his career, his style is very linear, sometimes reminding us of Cubism and the work of Modigliani. His more famous style is based on very long feminine faces with elongated eyes with no pupils at all. It's complicated to summarize several decades of work with just a few art movements, like how he was more into Fauvism in his first years and then he became a central figure in the Art Deco movement. But anyway, the point of this video is not to do like a biography of Eduardo Benito or like to study all of his work throughout the years, because that would be very long. And anyway, the reason I'm talking about him is because he illustrated perfume ads for Soir de Paris. So my goal with those videos is to talk about artists, their influences and their style in general, but specifically when it comes to perfume ads, how they came to work for perfume ads. He did share his work several times, like for example on the 10th May of 1935 in New York, where he exposed paintings and drawings, but also in 1948 at the 161st exposition officielle des Beaux-Arts, where he presented 5 sepia drawings. So he illustrated several books besides the one he did during World War I, for example from 1939 to 1941. He illustrated an edition of l'Iliade and l'Odyssée, where he created 48 illustrations for 4 volumes. He came back to France after the crash because for some time he went to the US, and during World War II he made the portrait of Pétain. If you don't know who Pétain was, long story short, he was celebrated as a hero from World War I. And then when World War II started and the Nazis were like, we are going to invade France, we had constructed a wall after World War I, but they just went around the wall. So we were like, we need somebody who helped us already, somebody we know we can trust. So French people called Pétain, but the guy was not very a hero anymore. He was like, oh, Nazis, let me be friend with you. So he surrendered France. Long story short, not a nice person. Paris Soir said about the portrait, quoting, d'importantes toiles dans laquelle il a su exprimer la volonté du chef de l'État de poursuivre son œuvre malgré les difficultés. If we go back a little back in time, after he arrived in France in 1912, he started working for a printer called Draeger. And so when he started working for Draeger, that's when he started working on ads. So at the end of World War II, he created 2 ads for la SNCF about 2 destinations, les Vosges and l'Alsace. And these ads are part of an entire series about the different destinations you can go to in France, thanks to the trains and la SNCF. And also they were all made by different artists, famous artists. And also he created the illustrations for what's nowadays considered one of the most important creations for the art of ads in French, which is la Dernière, lettre, persane. So under the guidance of Draeger, this art book was created to promote the Fur House Max. If we compare the illustrations he did for Vogue and the one he did for Soir de Paris, we can see there's some differences in his style. So Eduardo Benito created several ads for Soir de Paris, for the French market and for the American market. For the last ones, it's the same illustrations, it's just the text that changes. The style of Eduardo Benito at the peak of his career is easily recognizable with, very big faces. So the face is a very central element in his work, and a lot of time the illustration he created was a close-up of a face. The necks, the legs, the arms, they're all very straight and long. And so the colors he uses in his illustrations are very often flat. So this way of adding colors is an evolution of his first illustrations, where he did something similar to the images of Épinal. And it's the illustrations of his peak time that give some people this idea that his style is very close to Modigliani. But the thing is, the portraits made by Modigliani were actually inspired by the fang masks of Gabon. And from those masks, he only keeps certain shapes he then uses in his portraits. And so Eduardo Benito uses similar shapes. But those shapes, they can also remind us of the work of Constantin Brancusi, who also was inspired by cultures that were not Europeans. But still, Eduardo Benito did not stop at illustration. He also did paint sometimes, like for the Vogue cover of November 1934. And that's what he does in 1949 for the ad for Soir de Paris. In this ad, the colors are not flat. It's a lot of very small touches of colors. And together, those small touches of color, they create the feminine figure and the Parisian background. Also, in this ad, at the back, you can see the fountains of La Place de la Concorde, which then add to the chic of the ensemble. So him using his painting style instead of his illustration style gives a more intimate mood to the ad, and it kind of gives the impression of it being a dream. The way he uses colors does remind us a bit of the Fauvism art movement, because for this art movement, color is not here to replicate reality. It's here to create a feeling, a mood, and not simply a perfect copy of reality. And that's how Eduardo Benito uses the color in this ad for Soir de Paris. If for the perfume ads, Eduardo Benito prefers using his painting style rather than his illustration style, it doesn't mean that the two are like super separated, you know, because they're still created by the same person, so there is a discussion between the two. Eduardo Benito created 3 perfume ads for Soir de Paris for the French market, which were also used for the American market. So you just have to look at them to see the similarities with the rest of his work. For those ones, he goes away from, you know, all the colors that we saw in the previous ads, and he stays in the blue tones. And why blue? It's simply because it's like the color of Soir de Paris. If you look at the bottles, at the packaging, all of it is blue, a very specific blue. It's the blue you see just before nighttime. If for those 3 ads the colors are different from the previous one, the feminine figures and the shapes are similar. And those 3 ads, they also uses Parisian monuments to give you this feeling of, you know, it's Paris, it's the city of love, it's chic, it's elegant, because it's the birthplace of high fashion and also modern perfume. So, not perfume, modern perfume. The perfume ad for Soir de Paris that was meant for the American market in 1948, I got it from the Ladies' Home Journal of March 1947 and March 1948. So this is the magazine I found them in. Doesn't mean it was not published in another magazine. It doesn't mean that Eduardo Benito did not make more perfume ads for Soir de Paris or for other perfumes. It's just that I could not find them, so maybe they exist. And also when I was rewriting this video, I found a 5th perfume ad for Soir de Paris created by Benito, but it's in black and white. And the thing is, some ads were published in magazines in black and white, not because they were originally in black and white, but because it's about the budget, and when you release a new perfume you will put it in colors to attract the readers. But as time goes by, once in a while we just publish it in black and white because it's cheaper. And so when you launch a new product or you launch a new edition of that perfume, you print it again in color. So just because I could only find it in black and white does not mean it was originally created in black and white. And in France in 1944, the text of the ad is not directly on the illustration, but on the next page. Anyway, finally done. Now I have to go back to making wings to dress like an angel for my video about Carnet. So I hope you enjoyed it. If there is an artist who did perfume ads that you want me to talk about, I'm taking a suggestion for the background and my outfit. So specifically because I looked at illustrations Eduardo Benito did for Vogue. Usually it's a plain background, but sometimes you have geometrical shapes, so that's why I did that. I also did this by hand. You can't see it, but I have made a split skirt with vinyl, because so split skirts are older than the other movement, but Eduardo Benito represented a lot of modern women for the time, so you know, modern women with like shorter hair, stuff like that. I'm happy with the waist though, and for the top I was too lazy to make something else,